Hello, my name is Megan Murphy. I will be discussing option 2, which is discussing the influence of media and women's representation. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are the obstructions that media has on women's representation. So the first thing is the double bind standard. So according to Lawless and Fox's interpretation of the double bind, is a professional succession in women's lives and then balancing the womanly duties. So if a woman is unable to succeed in both of these professions and mainly failure in the womanly duties, the media grabs onto that, makes it into a negative connotation, and then manipulates it into a way that the voter sees it as being an unfit for a political position and thus hinders the woman's campaign. So Murray continues on with the standard by saying these assumptions the media looks at, is a candidate too old, too young, is she too connected or too independent, is she too masculine or too feminine? And a great example of this is the presidential campaign Hillary Clinton did in the past, and being seen as being too masculine and really hurting her campaign. But ironically, President Obama was seen as being feminine, and it actually helped him. So encountering these double bind standards can bring additional pressures to women candidates in order to fulfill these requirements and pretty much abide to the media standards. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the gender stereotypes in America, and certainly on the lives of women in political campaigns. So generally women are seen as stereotype-wise as the caregivers of society, while men are seen as the breadwinners. And furthermore, women have the tendency to advocate more for communal issues such as childcare, education, and women's health, and least likely for competitive issues such as military and budgets, which is more on the male side. This is mainly due to the idea, according to Lawless and Fox, that politics is more of a good old boys atmosphere where politicians are typically male-dominated, and that's what the viewers like to see. So Finnick actually looked at this and indicated that gender stereotypes may lead voters to view male candidates as strong leaders and more knowledgeable on issues like foreign policy and economy as compared to their female counterparts, which, as again, focus more on communal issues. So overall, the media's attention to gender stereotypes in female candidates has certainly negatively impacted the performance of a candidate in the professional setting. The third thing is the media's press coverage of men and women is very unequal. In a recent study by Kittleson, it was determined that male candidate traits were more often discussed than female traits by approximately 90% during a political campaign in the United States. In other countries, it was about 80%. So it's really high when you think about it. However, when covering female traits, the results favored the females, obviously, and then male traits favored the males. But as we learned through this class, female traits are not favorable in a political setting. Additionally, when women have the opportunity to be covered for press, it's very limited, but when the opportunity arises, it's not political based. It's more of a, what is she wearing? What type of makeup is she doing? Why is she wearing those heels? How's her family doing? And so forth, which definitely doesn't portray what the woman is actually trying to relay her political ambitions for. An interesting thing that I found by Dr. Danny Hayes from George Washington University was that when women are being covered by the press, they typically have more of a masculine trait being demonstrated, while men have more of a feminine trait. So ultimately, media coverage of female candidates does not compare to male candidate coverage in very different viewpoints in the voters' eyes. So the two ways that they actually do help women, the media actually does help women's representation, is by portraying a very strong female leadership and through this descriptive representation. Having this representation, a female voter is more likely to be relatable to the female candidate and gain a better understanding of governmental practices or policies or legislation that is currently happening. It will also allow future political candidates to establish their own opinions and solutions through the media's influence. Lastly, another way that the media helps is by having a set of role models for adolescent teens. So a study done by Christina Wolberg from the University of Notre Dame indicates that the presence of women in office has a positive impact on girls' frequency of political discussion with their friends, and they're more likely to engage in political activities that then go into the avenue of becoming a politician. So having that role model basis the media portrays is very crucial for the representation of women in general. So the last thing is that if I were a media campaign manager, I would base my conclusions on my candidate should be very logical and rational, be able to balance agenic traits and communal traits, and also be engaging with the public as much as possible. So all of these are relatable to Angela Merkel and Michelle Blanchett, where they're very logical, very rational thinkers, and they ultimately, with that mindset, were able to become presidents or higher up political officials. And this also is like a middle ground for that double bind, not too feminine, not too masculine, and so forth. And this goes hand in hand with the agenic and communal traits as well. Again, by having the balance of these traits, the candidate will not only reduce the gender stereotypes, but also reduce the media scrutiny to actually focus on the message that the candidate has to portray, which is ultimately what politics is all about. And lastly, being engaged in the public is a big thing, showing that you're competitive, you're willing to set aside time to be with the public, is showing that the candidate is very well-rounded and is ultimately in for the long run when concerning community and political issues. In essence, creating a very well-rounded candidate for public to feel confident in and will set the candidate apart from others running. Thank you.